septic arthritis, and your non-suppurative osteomyelitis, which includes your TB, fungal osteomyelitis, and rest all small osteomyelitis. Okay. So MSK infections, we approach the MSK infections under six categories. Okay. The most important one and the most commonly encountered one is your suppurative osteomyelitis, which we encounter in our day-to-day cases. Next, we have your non-suppurative osteomyelitis, which consists of your tubercular osteomyelitis. Next, we can have syphilitic osteomyelitis. The most important question which we get is your congenital syphilitic osteomyelitis. Okay. Then we can have fungal osteomyelitis, which is your mycotic osteomyelitis. Next, we have your soft tissue infections, which consist of tenosynovitis, bursitis, pyomyositis, and necrotizing fasciitis. Okay. So these four terms we discuss as a part of soft tissue infections. And last is your joint involvement, which is your septic arthritis. Okay, so in this class, we'll just be focusing on your suppurative osteomyelitis because most of the concepts about suppurative osteomyelitis are flawed uh, at your resident level. Okay, so we should be very particular and we should be very clear with the concepts. Okay, so let us start. Suppurative osteomyelitis consists of the main entity is itself the suppurative osteomyelitis, and then we have some smaller entities like your Brodie's abscess, your sclerosing osteomyelitis, chronic osteomyelitis, and one is your childhood inflammatory discitis. We start with the suppurative and or also we call it as the pyogenic osteomyelitis. Okay. So before starting that, we should be well versed with what are the major pathways where all the infection can reach the bone. Okay. The most common, the most important is your hematogenous spread of infection. Okay. That's the most common source of osteomyelitis. Second is it can be from a subjacent site of infection. Okay. It's a contiguous source of infection. This is usually seen in cutaneous infections, sinus infections, and dental infections. Okay, so all of these sites can involve your subjacent bones. Okay, so this is your second most common pathway of infection, and this is exactly reverse to that of hematogenous spread. Why? Because in hematogenous spread, first the bone is infected, followed by your soft tissues. Okay, and in the contiguous source of infection, initially the soft tissues are infected, followed by the bone. Okay. So we call it as reverse osteomyelitis as well. So there's a term which we have reserved for the contiguous source of infections, which is your reverse osteomyelitis. Then there are two very small pathways. One is your direct implantation, very simple. There's a nail, splinter, or glass which has entered your skin, and that can cause infection. Open fracture is one of the causes. Okay. And then we can have post-operative infection as well. Okay. So these are smaller ones. The most important ones is your number one, most common hematogenous. Second is from the contiguous source. Okay. Now, in different age group, the different pathways they are more common. So in infants and children, the hematogenous pathway predominates, while in adults, the contiguous spread from soft tissue infections or the direct inoculation, that's the most common pathway. Okay. One thing you have to keep in mind that infants and children, they most commonly and will encounter long bone osteomyelitis or long tubular bone osteomyelitis, while in adults, they will be most commonly encounter the vertebral osteomyelitis. Okay, that is more common than your long tubular osteomyelitis here. Okay, so in this class, we'll discuss both the findings of osteomyelitis in the long tubular bones as well as in the vertebral bodies. Okay, so again, hematogenous spread, most common spread in infants and children. And adults, it is your contiguous spread or the direct inoculation. Long tubular bone osteomyelitis, more common in infants and children, while vertebral osteomyelitis is the most common osteomyelitis in adults. Now, before we start with the radiological features of the osteomyelitis, we should be very clear about the vascular anatomy of the tubular bones in different age groups. Okay, because the spread, the pathological features will vary according to the differential blood supply in different age groups. Okay, so for our understanding purposes, we divide the age groups into three parts. One is your infant or infantile group, other is your childhood group, and third one is your adult group. So we're dividing the patients into three groups. We'll discuss the vascular anatomy one by one in these groups. Okay. So please listen carefully about this. Okay. Uh, Most of you will not be well versed with these concepts. So we start with the infantile pattern. So please remember that in fetal vascular pattern, when will the rest of the classes not? Uh, but what are the rest of the classes? So we are starting with the infantile pattern. Okay. So what? Please listen carefully. So what happens in the fetal vascular compartment of the bones? That there is no presence of physeal plate in the fetus. Okay. So no physeal plate in the fetus, and this pattern, because absence of the physeal plate, persists till about 8 months of age. Okay. The physeal plate starts to develop at the age of 8 months. Okay. So since there is no physeal plate present, now what happens is the metaphyseal and the diaphyseal vessels, some of them will traverse into the epiphysis. The vessels which traverse into the epiphysis are called as transphyseal vessels. Okay, so these are called as transphyseal vessels. So what will happen is we all know that the most common site of infection in long tubular wounds is the metaphysis because of the peculiar anatomy of the vessels here, which leads to sluggish blood flow, and then there is inoculation of the microorganisms in the metaphysis. No. Since we have some vessels which run from the metaphysis to the epiphysis, so there is an easy way for the infection to spread to the epiphysis and hence involve the joint also. Okay. So because of the absence of physeal plate barrier in infants, there is spread of infection from the metaphysis to the epiphysis, leading to increased incidence of septic arthritis in infantile osteomyelitis. Okay, so because of this reason, infantile osteomyelitis will present definitely present along with septic arthritis along with epiphyseal involvement. Okay. Now, this physeal growth plate barrier, it starts to develop at 8 months of age and is fully formed by 18th month. So we can say that the infantile pattern, it is fully active before 8 months of age. It starts to decrease after 8 months as the physeal plate starts to develop and is completely replaced by the childhood pattern after 18 months of age when the physeal plate is completely developed. Okay, I'll repeat it once again. From 0 to 8 months, it's the infantile pattern which predominates. What is the infantile pattern? That we have high incidence of septic arthritis and epiphyseal involvement in case of if there is a case of infantile osteomyelitis. After 8 months to 18 months, the infantile pattern starts to decrease, and after 18th month, it's the childhood pattern which takes over. Okay, so this tells us that the epiphyseal plate starts to develop at 8 months, and by 18th month, the physeal plate is fully developed. Okay, so incidence of septic arthritis with infantile osteomyelitis is maximum in 0 to 8 months. It starts to decrease from 8 months and it will completely stop after 18th month when the physeal plate completely develops. What are the consequences, which I already told you? There is epiphyseal involvement, which can lead to slipped epiphysis. This can lead to growth impairment. And if there's a joint involvement, there is joint effusion, there are erosions that will lead to septic arthritis. Now, what is the childhood pattern? Okay. Now, the childhood pattern, it persists till, or it starts from full formation of physeal plate